The ups and downs of this year have disrupted lives and led to immense hardships for billions across the planet. It's been an emotional roller coaster, to say the least. However, one silver lining is the increased spotlight on mental health. Recently, PR Week magazine reported that health and wellness podcasts on Spotify saw an increase in listenership of 180% this year. And it's not just podcasts. From literature to teletherapy, a greater number of adults are actively finding methods to lower stress, calm anxiety, and just generally feel better each day. But it hasn't always been this way. Even in recent history, openly talking about mental health was considered taboo. For many Americans, discussions around therapy or seeking other kinds of help have often been kept under wraps. But times are changing. Younger generations, especially, are more transparent about their own emotional struggles and what helps ground them. One such method that has gained a following in recent years is expressing greater gratitude for the things you do have in life, even if it hasn't been the best year.
I think it's great to be looking forward to 2021, and we certainly all should. But we're in the midst of 2020 still, even though there's not much time left. And we can't write off a day. We can't write off a year. We have to always be able to stop and say, there was something good in here, and I have to be able to find it.
That's journalist Janice Kaplan, author of the book The Gratitude Diaries and host of the Gratitude Diaries podcast. She says that practicing gratitude means taking a few moments each day to jot down on some paper, in a journal, or even in your phone, some reminders of the good things in life. And it doesn't have to be something grand. It can be as small as enjoying a cup of hot coffee or chatting with a family member or friend for a few minutes.
I think a lot of people think of gratitude as being soft and sappy. And it turns out that it's really quite the opposite. That gratitude gives you a kind of power because it gives you the power to see things differently. It gives you the power to be more in control. And psychologists say it actually takes a lot of courage and strength to be grateful and kinder. And I think that's really important for us to remember, that gratitude is not a sign of weakness. It's quite the opposite.
Back in 2013, Kaplan teamed up with a nonprofit group, the John Templeton Foundation, to oversee a survey about how Americans view gratitude. The survey polled more than 2,000 people from around the U.S. and showed some interesting results. 90 to 95% of people responded with the belief that grateful people were happier. And with this in mind, they were then asked if they themselves took time to reflect on what they were grateful for. Less than half responded yes.
I realized that we have what I started to refer to as a gratitude gap, where there's something we know is going to make us happier, but we don't do it. And cut to, for me personally, I was at a New Year's Eve party in Manhattan where I lived, and you know how on New Year's Eve everybody seems to be dancing in the streets and having a better time than you are? Somebody turned on the TV a few minutes before midnight and watching the ball about to go down, and I started to wonder what could make me have the kind of year where I wanted to end up dancing on the streets. And I thought of all the obvious things. You can win the lottery, you could buy a new house, but I then remembered that gratitude gap, and then I remembered that survey that I had done, and I realized that it wasn't the events that happened in the year, but how we think about them and what my attitude was towards them. And so right then I decided to challenge myself and see what would happen if I tried to spend a year living more gratefully.
At the end of that year, Kaplan emerged as a more thankful and overall happier person. So how can you start to do the same in your own day-to-day? There are several ways to go about it, but ultimately, do what feels best to you. This can mean writing down how you feel each morning and then answering what you're grateful for at the end of the day, or simply jotting down a few thoughts when you have a second.
For a lot of people, a gratitude journal sounds like a chore. And people start a journal and they write in it 2 nights, and who wants to come home and write an essay every night? So I think you can make gratitude a lot simpler than that. What you really want to be doing is just changing your attitude. And one way I suggest doing it is just put a scrap of paper next to your bed and tell yourself that you're going to write down 2 words every night for a week about things that made you grateful that day.
If you want more direction while writing, there are several gratitude journals online or in bookstores that have different prompts, such as daily affirmations and quotes. But if you're writing in a blank diary, what's the difference between writing what you're grateful for versus straight journaling? Both are good, but Kaplan says that sometimes writing freely, while it helps to unload what's in your head, can lead down a slippery slope.
Most of the time when you write in your journal, it's when you're miserable. And you write about, the anxiety of the world and how somebody has treated you badly. And it's just kind of a way of expressing and getting it out. And then you go back and you look at that and you think, was my life really that terrible? A gratitude journal or a gratitude scrap of paper does the opposite for you. It reminds you of the good times in your day, and it reminds you of the good things that you have had, and it reminds you that you're going to get those things again. I think sometimes we think that looking at the world negatively and seeing the bad and seeing the problems is somehow more sophisticated or more intellectual than seeing the good. And I don't think that's true at all. It's not that the negative is the reality and we're putting on rose-colored glasses to see the positive. It's that we can see any event from two different sides, from many different sides, and allowing yourself to be grateful doesn't mean that you're not seeing the problems, doesn't mean you're not recognizing what needs to change, but you're saying within that there are good things, and those are the things that I want to see and focus on and remind myself of.
Kaplan notes that another important part of the process is revisiting what you've already written. These previous entries can be a refresher on what consistently brings you joy and comfort. It's also a powerful tool to use when you're feeling blue.
There is a lot of research showing that writing in a gratitude journal does make people feel better. It decreases depression. It just makes you generally happier and more positive. It's just a lovely reminder to yourself that you can take that control back and you can think differently about the world.
As we close the chapter on this year, and many begin to look ahead to 2021, what new habits are you hoping to form? Kaplan says that while 2020 has been a rough year for most, it's important to not completely write it off and instead take some time to find any kind of silver lining. Take any positives with you into next year, along with realistic New Year's resolutions.
I think the real resolution you want to make is not about something specific, that you're going to do this or do that, but that you are going to try to find the good, that you're going to try to find the positive, that you're going to try to make yourself see the possibilities in the world and in yourself and in your community. And I think that the more we give and the more we give to each other and the more we support each other, the more we are able to feel grateful and see that circle of giving and gratitude and hope and possibility.
To get more information on this topic and how to get started, check out Janice Kaplan's book or podcast, The Gratitude Diaries. Also, look up the 5-Minute Journal if you're looking for another great guided option. You can learn more and get archives of all of our past shows at viewpointsradio.org. For more behind the scenes, search Viewpoints Radio on Twitter and Facebook. This segment was written and produced by Amira Zaveri. Studio production by Jason Dickey. I'm Marty Peterson.
Viewpoints returns in just a moment.
As many as 89% of hospitalized COVID-19 patients are at risk of a complication called cytokine storm, a leading cause of COVID death. But there's good news. Hospitals across the U.S. are enrolling patients in a trial evaluating lemzilumab, an investigational treatment designed specifically to stop this storm, even with only 1 day of treatment. Dr. Cameron Durant, CEO of Humanigen, the company developing lemzilumab.
Having a therapeutic that can significantly reduce the time to recovery from COVID-19 and send patients home earlier could dramatically impact the arc of this pandemic.
Participating in the study means access to a potential treatment option in addition to standard of care therapies. Trial participant Mark Baranski shares his experience.
I don't know if I received lemzilumab or not, but I viewed the trial as doing everything I could for my recovery while contributing to the fight against COVID-19. I certainly encourage others to do the same.
To learn more and find this trial near you, visit StopStorm.com. That's StopStorm.com.
And that's Viewpoints for this week. Viewpoints is a production of MediaTrax Communications. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to learn more about upcoming shows. And find a library of past programs on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify. Plus, you'll always find previous segments and more information about our guests at viewpointsradio.org. Join us again next week for another edition of Viewpoints. Coming up next week.
Throw away that old script and trust ourselves to improvise and relate in that moment. We'll get a much better result.
Flipping the script by practicing improv. Then,
they would show this wall of categories, and you would choose your category, and the host would push a button, and an IBM sorting machine would start spitting out question cards.
We explore the game shows of the past. I'm Marty Peterson.
and I'm Gary Price. These stories in depth on your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.